I stood in my kitchen, staring at my phone in disbelief, as my 30th birthday dinner grew cold around me. The table was perfectly set for 6 people, with my grandmother's china candles flickering across a meal that had taken me all day to prepare. My apartment was spotless, decorated with photos from happy moments throughout my life. But 3 hours after everyone was supposed to arrive, not a single family member had shown up. No calls, no texts. Just silence, until now. I read my mother's message again. "Sorry, honey, we're at Amanda's. Big news today will bring you leftovers. Tomorrow," I felt my chest tighten as I looked at the carefully arranged table, the homemade cake, and the empty chairs. Something inside me finally broke. 6 months earlier, I had finally received the promotion I'd been working toward for years. After struggling through entry-level marketing positions and fighting for recognition, I was now marketing director at Westfield Communications. The salary bump allowed me to move out of my cramped studio into this beautiful 2-bedroom apartment with high ceilings and a view of the city park. For the first time, I had a home I was truly proud of. "This calls for a proper housewarming," Jessica had said when she helped me move in. "You should have your family over." I had hesitated. Family gatherings had always been complicated for me. My older sister Amanda somehow always became the center of attention, even at events meant to celebrate my accomplishments. My mother Caroline facilitated this, while my father Thomas remained passively supportive of whatever my mother wanted. My younger brother Jack, 6 years, my junior, generally tried to keep the peace. "I don't know, Jess. Remember my college graduation dinner? Mom spent half the time talking about Amanda's new job." Jessica rolled her eyes. "That's exactly why you need to do this. Show them you're successful on your own terms, plus it's your 30th birthday soon. Perfect timing." I had agreed reluctantly, but as the weeks passed, my confidence grew. My new position came with newfound assertiveness, and I decided my birthday would be different. I would host my family in my beautiful new apartment and finally receive the recognition I'd always craved, but rarely received. When I called my mother to invite everyone, she had sounded genuinely enthusiastic. "30 is a big one, Marianne. We wouldn't miss it. I'll make sure everyone keeps the date clear." My father had called separately to confirm. "Looking forward to seeing your new place, kiddo. Your mother's been telling everyone about your promotion. Even Amanda had sent a text. Can't wait to see the new apartment. Blake and I will definitely be there." Their responses fueled my excitement. I spent weeks planning the menu, deciding to recreate my grandmother's famous pot roast using her handwritten recipe card. Grandma Helen had been the one person who always made me feel special, particularly on my birthdays before she passed away 5 years ago. Using her recipe felt like having a piece of her with me. The day of my birthday, I woke early with nervous energy. I spent hours cleaning, arranging fresh flowers, and preparing the meal. By 5 o'clock, everything was perfect. I had even bought a new dress for the occasion, a deep blue that brought out my eyes. 6 o'clock came and went. Then, 6:30. I sent a group text. "Dinner's ready whenever you arrive." By 7, my stomach was knotting with anxiety. I called my mother. No answer. My father. Straight to voicemail. "Amanda." Nothing. Jack finally answered at 7:30. "Oh, Marianne." His voice sounded strange. "Are you not checking social media? Everyone's at Amanda's. She just announced she's pregnant." I felt like I'd been slapped. "But today is my birthday dinner. You all RSVP'd weeks ago." "I know, I'm sorry. It was last minute. Mom got really excited when Amanda called with the news, and she decided we should all go over there to celebrate. I thought someone would have told you." My hands shaking, I opened Instagram. There, it was a photo posted 2 hours earlier of my entire family gathered around Amanda and her husband Blake, champagne glasses raised, except for Amanda's, which held what looked like sparkling water. My mother's caption read, "Celebrating the most wonderful news. Baby, coming in January. Number, blessed, number, grandma at last." Not a single mention of my birthday. Not a single thought about the dinner they were missing. That's when I texted my mother directly, "Where is everyone? Dinner's getting cold," and received her reply, "Sorry, honey, we're at Amanda's. Big news today. We'll bring you leftovers tomorrow." As if my birthday celebration was nothing more than leftovers to be dealt with another day. I sank into a chair at my beautiful empty table. The candles had burned halfway down. The realization crashed over me like a wave. Nothing had changed. Despite my promotion, my new home, my careful planning, I was still an afterthought to my own family. The pain of this moment connected to countless others throughout my life. My 16th birthday, when my mother had scheduled Amanda's wisdom teeth removal, the same day canceling my small party. My high school graduation, when my parents left immediately after the ceremony to attend Amanda's dance recital, missing the honors reception where I received an award. My college scholarship celebration dinner that was cut short when Amanda called with news of her engagement. Each time I had swallowed my disappointment. Each time I had told myself it was unintentional, just bad timing. Each time I had made myself smaller to accommodate the family dynamic. But seeing my mother's flippant text about leftovers while sitting alone at a table set for 6 on my 30th birthday, something finally shifted inside me. The careful wall of excuses I had built to protect myself from the truth began to crumble. I called Jessica, barely able to speak through my tears. "They didn't come," I managed to say. "They're all at Amanda's. She's pregnant." "I'm coming over," Jessica said immediately. "Don't move." While waiting for Jessica, I scrolled through more social media posts. Each smiling family photo twisted the knife deeper. There was my father beaming with his arm around Amanda. My mother already talking about nursery colors. Even Jack looked happier than I'd seen him in months. What hurt most wasn't just their absence, but the complete lack of acknowledgement. Not one birthday wish, not one apology for missing dinner. It was as if my birthday simply didn't register on their family calendar. The doorbell rang 30 minutes later. Jessica stood there with a bottle of wine and fierce determination in her eyes. "This is absolutely not okay," she said, hugging me tightly. "I'm so sorry, Mary." We sat on my couch, the elaborate dinner still laid out on the table behind us. As the wine loosened the knot in my chest, I began recounting other incidents, memories, that I'd buried or excused. "Remember my first apartment warming party," I said. "Everyone canceled last minute because Amanda and Blake had a fight and my mom needed to be there for her." Jessica nodded. "And your college graduation dinner that turned into Amanda's engagement celebration. I always thought it was just bad timing," I said quietly. "But looking back, it's a pattern, isn't it?" "Mary, I've watched this happen your entire life," Jessica said gently. "You always make excuses for them. You minimize your own feelings. You act like it's normal for your accomplishments to be overlooked, while Amanda gets parades for every small thing." I wiped away tears. I just thought if I worked hard enough, achieved enough, they'd finally see me. "That's not how family is supposed to work," Jessica said. "You shouldn't have to earn basic consideration." Jessica opened Instagram again, but instead of showing me more family celebration photos, she pointed to something I'd missed entirely. A comment my mother had left on a friend's post, just that morning. "Can't wait for Marianne's birthday dinner tonight. She's gone all out with her grandmother's recipes." I stared at the timestamp. 10 hours ago. Hours before Amanda's announcement. "They knew," I whispered. "They consciously chose to skip my birthday for Amanda's announcement." It wasn't forgetfulness. It was a decision. This revelation hit me like a physical blow. All these years I had made excuses, assuming thoughtlessness rather than deliberate exclusion. But this comment proved my mother had remembered my birthday dinner and then decided along with everyone else that it wasn't important enough to attend or even properly cancel. "I'm so angry," I said the words, feeling foreign in my mouth. I rarely acknowledged anger, especially toward my family. I'm actually furious right now. "Good," Jessica said firmly. "You should be. This isn't okay, Mary. It's never been okay." After Jessica left around midnight, I sat alone in my darkened apartment. The candles had long since burned out. The food was cold and congealing. I should have been cleaning up, putting away leftovers, moving on as I always did. Instead, I pulled out old photo albums and began a painful journey through my past. There were the photos from family vacations, where Amanda always stood center frame while I was often at the edges or behind the camera. Birthday parties where Amanda had elaborate themes and dozens of guests, while mine were simple affairs often rescheduled around other more important events. Holidays where Amanda's gifts formed impressive piles, while mine were practical and forgettable. I'd never allowed myself to see the pattern clearly. Each incident in isolation could be explained away. Together, they told a story I had been avoiding my entire life. I was not a priority to my own family. I never had been. As painful as this realization was, it also ignited something new inside me. For the first time, I didn't immediately try to rationalize their behavior or blame myself. Instead, I felt the full force of my righteous anger, and with it came a strange sense of clarity. I decided to do something I had never done before. I would confront my mother directly. I waited until the following afternoon to call. I needed time to gather my thoughts and approach the conversation with clarity rather than just hurt and anger. My mother answered on the fourth ring. "Marianne, I was just about to call you. Did you get my text about bringing you some cake from yesterday?" Her casual tone, as if nothing significant had happened, made my blood boil. "Mom, I need to talk to you about last night," I said, working to keep my voice steady. "Oh, wasn't Amanda's news wonderful? You're going to be an aunt. I can't believe my first grandchild is finally on the way." I took a deep breath. "Mom, yesterday was my 30th birthday. I invited everyone for dinner weeks ago, and you all agreed to come. Then you all went to Amanda's instead, without even calling to cancel." There was a brief pause. "Well, honey, Amanda's announcement was very last minute. She didn't plan it to conflict with your dinner. But you did," I said. "You chose to go there instead of coming here as promised. You could have called. You could have suggested combining the celebrations. You could have done literally anything other than just not show up." My mother's tone chilled. "Marianne, you're being dramatic. It was just a dinner. This is your sister's first child. Surely you understand what a milestone that is for our family. And turning 30 isn't a milestone. Having my first dinner party in my new apartment after my promotion isn't important." "Of course it is, but—" she began. "But not as important as anything related to Amanda I finished for her." "That's not fair," my mother said, her voice hardening. "You've always been jealous of your sister, always needed attention." Her words stunned me. I was the one who had been stood up on my birthday, yet somehow I was being painted as jealous and attention-seeking. "Mom, this isn't about jealousy. This is about basic respect. You all committed to coming to my birthday dinner and then didn't even have the courtesy to call and cancel. We got caught up in the excitement," she said dismissively. "These things happen in families. You're taking it too personally." Taking it personally. It was my birthday. "Marianne, listen." Her tone shifted to the condescending one she often used when she thought I was being unreasonable. "We actually discussed whether to still attend your dinner after Amanda called with her news. We all agreed that her announcement deserved our full attention. Even your father felt that way, and you know how he usually tries to accommodate your sensitivities." I felt like I'd been slapped. "You discussed it. You all actually talked about my birthday dinner and collectively decided it wasn't worth attending or even calling me." "That's not how I would put it," she said clearly, realizing she'd said too much. "How would you put it, Mom?" "Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like my entire family, including Dad and Jack, who I thought were on my side, decided that my 30th birthday wasn't even worth a phone call." The line went quiet for a moment. "Amanda knew it was your birthday dinner," my mother finally said. "She didn't want to wait to share her news. She's been trying for a baby for 6 months, you know." This new information made everything worse. So, Amanda deliberately scheduled her announcement on the same day as my birthday dinner, and none of you saw any problem with that. She wanted the whole family together, and we were already planning to gather for your dinner. It just made sense to move the location to her house since she's the one with the news. The casual way she justified completely dismissing my celebration made something snap inside me. Years of swallowing my feelings, of making myself smaller, of accepting that Amanda's needs would always come first, erupted in a sudden burst of clarity. Mom, do you realize that this has been happening my entire life? My graduation, my scholarship dinner, my apartment warming. Every milestone I've ever had has been overshadowed by something related to Amanda. That's simply not true, my mother said coldly. You're creating a narrative that doesn't exist because you're upset about one missed dinner. I laughed bitterly. It's never been just one thing, Mom. It's been my entire life. I think you need to calm down and get some perspective, Marianne. Family means supporting each other's joy, not competing for attention. Exactly my point, I said quietly. When has my family ever truly supported my joy? When has Amanda ever stepped back to let me have a moment? This conversation isn't productive, my mother said. Call me when you're ready to be happy for your sister, instead of making everything about yourself. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in stunned silence, the phone still clutched in my hand. The conversation had gone worse than I'd imagined possible. Not only had my mother dismissed my feelings entirely, but she'd revealed an even more painful truth. My family had consciously, collectively decided that my birthday wasn't worth honoring. Amanda had known exactly what she was doing when she scheduled her announcement on my birthday. And worse still, my mother saw absolutely nothing wrong with any of it. The realization left me feeling hollow. All these years I'd believed that if I just communicated better, if they understood how their actions affected me, things would change. Now I saw how naive that hope had been. The dynamic wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the fundamental structure of our family. Amanda at the center, everyone else revolving around her needs, and me, somewhere on the periphery, expected to orbit silently and without complaint. Later that evening, Amanda herself called. I almost didn't answer, but some part of me still hoped for acknowledgement, perhaps even an apology. "Hey, sis," she said cheerfully. "Mom said you were upset about yesterday. I wanted to check in." "Congratulations on your pregnancy," I said flatly. "Thanks. We're so excited. I know the timing wasn't great with your dinner and all, but when I got the confirmation from the doctor yesterday morning, I just couldn't wait to tell everyone." "You couldn't have waited one day, or included me in the celebration," she sighed dramatically. "Marianne, please don't make this into a competition. This is about a new life coming into our family. Your dinner could happen any time." It wasn't just a dinner, Amanda. It was my 30th birthday, a milestone, in my new apartment that none of you have even seen yet. "We can come see your apartment anytime," she said dismissively. 30 isn't that big a deal anyway. Wait till you hit 40. Her casual dismissal of my feelings, so similar to our mother's, made it clear that there would be no recognition of what they had done, let alone an apology. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a one-time oversight. It was a deeply entrenched pattern that neither my mother nor Amanda could even see, much less acknowledge. "I have to go," I said, unable to continue the conversation without saying things I might regret. "Don't be like that," Amanda said. "Look, we're having people over this weekend to celebrate the pregnancy properly. You should come. It'll make Mom happy." The invitation, clearly an afterthought, with no consideration for my feelings, was the final confirmation of my place in the family hierarchy. I was expected to quickly get over my disappointment and show up to celebrate Amanda, just as I always had. "I'll think about it," I lied, then ended the call. That night, I barely slept. The conversations with my mother and Amanda kept replaying in my mind, along with flashes of similar dynamics throughout my life. By morning, I felt physically ill from the emotional turmoil. I called in sick to work for the first time in years and spent the day in a fog of hurt and confusion. Over the next few days, I moved through my life like a ghost. I went to work, I came home, I ate and slept. But I felt disconnected from everything. Friends called and texted, but I responded with brief reassurances, that I was fine, unable to articulate the fundamental shift happening inside me. After a week of this, Jessica staged an intervention, showing up at my apartment with takeout and concern. "Okay, this has gone on long enough," she said, setting down bags of Chinese food. "You're not answering calls, you're posting cryptic things on social media, and Terry from work said you've been like a zombie in meetings." I managed a weak smile. "That obvious, huh? Talk to me, Mary. What happened after I left on your birthday?" I told her about the conversations with my mother and Amanda, their dismissals and justifications, the revelation that they had consciously decided to skip my birthday. "I think I'm having some kind of breakdown," I admitted. "I keep remembering things from our childhood events I hadn't thought about in years. It's like I'm seeing my entire life through a different lens, and it's terrifying." Jessica took my hand. "I think you might benefit from talking to someone professional about this. I can give you my therapist's number. Sarah's amazing." 2 days later, I was sitting in Sarah's office, nervously twisting a tissue in my hands as I recounted the birthday incident and its aftermath. "It sounds like this event has triggered a significant reevaluation of your family relationships," Sarah observed after listening intently. "These patterns you're recognizing didn't start with your birthday, did they?" "No," I admitted. "They've been there my whole life. I just never allowed myself to see them clearly." Over the next few sessions, Sarah helped me explore these patterns. We discussed my childhood, the family dynamic that consistently placed Amanda at the center, my mother's enabling of this hierarchy, my father's passive acceptance, and my own learned behavior of minimizing my needs and feelings. "You developed coping mechanisms as a child," Sarah explained, "making yourself smaller, accepting less attention and validation, taking responsibility for other people's behavior toward you. These were survival strategies in your family system, but they're not serving you as an adult." "I feel so stupid," I confessed during our 4th session. "How did I not see this for 30 years? "It's not about intelligence," Sarah assured me. "When we grow up in a dysfunctional system, that dysfunction becomes our normal. It often takes a significant event, like what happened on your birthday, to create enough distance to see the patterns clearly." With Sarah's guidance, I began to understand how deeply these family dynamics had shaped my life beyond just family gatherings. My tendency to overwork, to prove my worth, my difficulty accepting compliments or recognition, my pattern of friendships and relationships where my needs came second, all stemmed from the same root, the belief that I was somehow less, deserving of attention, care, and celebration than others. "The important question now," Sarah said, "one day is, what do you want to do with this awareness?" I didn't have an answer yet. Part of me wanted to confront my entire family to make them see the hurt they had caused. Another part wanted to cut ties completely. Neither option felt quite right. "You don't have to decide everything at once," Sarah assured me. "Healing isn't linear, and establishing healthy boundaries is a process." 3 weeks after my birthday, I was cleaning out a closet in my spare bedroom, a task I'd been putting off since moving in, when I found a box of childhood mementos I'd brought from my parents' house years ago, but never unpacked. Inside were school projects, report cards, certificates from swimming lessons and debate club, and a stack of birthday cards. I sat on the floor sorting through them, smiling at my grandmother's distinctive handwriting on many of the envelopes. Grandma Helen had never forgotten my birthday, always sending cards with thoughtful messages and often small gifts that showed she knew my interests and passions. At the bottom of the stack was an envelope I didn't recognize. It was addressed to me in my grandmother's handwriting, but the envelope was still sealed. I carefully opened it to find a card for my 18th birthday, and inside a folded letter. "My dearest Mary Ann," it began. "As you step into adulthood, there are things I feel I should say to you that I've never quite found the right moment to express." What followed was 5 pages of my grandmother's thoughts written shortly before she had the stroke that eventually led to her death when I was 25. She wrote about watching me grow up, her pride in my resilience and kindness, but also her concerns. "I have watched with a heavy heart how your light is often dimmed in our family," she wrote. "Your mother, my daughter, recreates patterns from her own childhood that I failed to break. Your sister has learned to take center stage, and you have learned to step back. But, darling girl, you deserve to shine just as brightly. Never let anyone convince you that your joy, your accomplishments, your very presence is secondary. She went on to apologize for not intervening more directly, explaining that she had tried in subtle ways to balance the scales but feared creating deeper divisions. The letter concluded with hope for my future. My greatest wish for you is that you will recognize your own worth, independent of anyone else's validation. You are not too much when you express your needs, nor are you too sensitive when you acknowledge your hurt. You are exactly as you should be, a bright, loving, young woman who deserves to be celebrated not just on birthdays, but every day. Never forget that. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. It felt like my grandmother had reached across time and space to validate exactly what I was feeling now, 12 years after she had written these words. She had seen the dynamic clearly. She had worried about its effect on me, and most importantly, she had believed I deserved better. Finding this letter felt like a sign, a connection to the one person who had always made me feel truly seen and valued. It became a turning point in my emotional journey. If my grandmother, who loved our entire family, could recognize these patterns as unhealthy, then perhaps I wasn't imagining things or being overly sensitive as my mother had suggested. I brought the letter to my next therapy session with Sarah. "This is a powerful validation of your experience," she said after reading it. "How does it make you feel to know your grandmother saw these dynamics so clearly?" "Sad that she's not here," I admitted, "but also stronger somehow. Like I'm not crazy for feeling the way I do." "You're definitely not crazy," Sarah confirmed. "Your reactions are completely normal responses to the situation. The question remains, what boundaries do you want to establish going forward?" That question stayed with me as I continued therapy, as I returned to work with new focus, as I began to rebuild my sense of self outside the constraining role I'd played in my family. I didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time I was asking the right questions. A month after my birthday, I made a decision. Instead of continuing to ruminate on the past, I would take concrete action to reclaim my narrative. I created what I privately called my evidence box, a digital collection of screenshots, text messages, emails, and journal entries documenting the pattern of exclusion throughout my life. It wasn't meant to be vindictive, but rather to ground me in reality when self-doubt crept in or when family members tried to gaslight me into thinking I was overreacting. I also drafted a letter to my family. Not an angry accusation, but a clear, calm articulation of my feelings and boundaries going forward. After several drafts and review with Sarah, I had a version that felt right, honest, without being cruel firm, without being punitive. "I'm not sending it yet," I told Sarah, "but having it written makes me feel prepared." "That's a healthy approach," she agreed. "You're taking control of your narrative without rushing into confrontation before you're ready." With this foundation in place, I made another decision. I would host a rebirth celebration on the weekend after the 1-month anniversary of my actual birthday. Not to replace what I'd lost, but to create something new and meaningful. I carefully selected the guest list. Jessica, of course, colleagues who had become friends, my neighbor Rachel, who had brought me cookies when I moved in, a few college friends who lived in the area, people who had shown me genuine support and connection. "I love this idea," Jessica said when I told her. "It's not about replacing family, but about recognizing the family you've chosen." The day of my rebirth party arrived with none of the anxiety that had preceded my birthday. I prepared a simpler meal this time, focusing on foods I loved rather than trying to impress anyone. I decorated with fresh flowers and played music that made me happy. When my guests arrived, each bearing small gifts and warm hugs, my apartment felt more like a home than it ever had before. Midway through the evening, as we were finishing dinner and moving to dessert, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened it, Amanda was standing there with a small gift bag. "Surprise," she said, smiling uncertainly. "Mom mentioned you were having people over. I thought I'd stop by to bring your birthday present." I was too shocked to do anything but step back and let her in. Amanda surveyed the gathering with raised eyebrows, clearly not having expected an actual party. "Wow, quite the little celebration you've got here," she said, her tone subtly condescending. "Your work, friends." "Friends," I corrected, not adding the qualifier. "Would you like some dessert?" We were just about to cut the cake. Amanda accepted a small plate and immediately began talking about her pregnancy, turning the conversation to her morning sickness, doctor's appointments, and plans for the nursery. It was such a familiar pattern that I almost slipped back into my usual role of supportive audience member. But something had changed in me. "Actually, Amanda," I interrupted gently, "we were in the middle of a toast before you arrived." Jessica was sharing a story about our college days. Amanda looked startled, not used to being redirected. She glanced around at my friends who were watching with varying degrees of curiosity and protectiveness. "Right? Sorry," she said, though. Her tone suggested she wasn't. "Go ahead with your whatever this is." Jessica shot me a supportive look before continuing her story, which happened to be about a time I'd organized an impromptu beach trip that became legendary in our friend group. As she described my planning skills and spontaneous spirit, I noticed Amanda's expression souring. When Jessica finished, Amanda immediately jumped in. "That's cute. Speaking of planning, you should see what I'm doing for the nursery. I've created the most amazing mood board." She pulled out her phone and began scrolling through images, effectively commandeering the conversation again. As she talked, I saw her casting subtle glances at my apartment, her eyes lingering on a water stain on the ceiling. I hadn't yet addressed the slightly worn couch I'd bought secondhand. "It's not as spacious as our place, of course," she commented, gesturing vaguely around my living room, "but you've made it cozy, very you." The backhanded compliment hung in the air. In the past, I would have swallowed my hurt and thanked her. This time I said nothing, allowing the awkwardness of her remark to speak for itself. Jessica, who had known us both since childhood, had apparently reached her limit. "You know, Amanda," she said, "evenly Marianne's promotion to marketing director is actually a bigger deal than you seem to realize. This apartment is in one of the most desirable areas of the city. But more importantly today is about celebrating her, not critiquing her choices or changing the subject to your pregnancy for the 5th time in 20 minutes. The room went silent. Amanda's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "I was just making conversation," she said defensively. "And I came here to wish my sister happy birthday, not to be attacked by her friends." "A month late," Jessica pointed out. "After you scheduled your pregnancy announcement on her actual birthday and drew the entire family away from her dinner without even a phone call." Amanda turned to me, clearly expecting me to defend her as I always had. "Are you going to let her talk to me like that? I'm pregnant, for God's sake." In that moment, with all my friends watching, I faced a familiar crossroads: smooth things over at my own expense, or stand in my truth. My grandmother's letter flashed in my mind. "You are not too much when you express your needs." "Jessica isn't attacking you, Amanda," I said calmly. "She's pointing out a pattern that hurt me deeply. And yes, congratulations again on your pregnancy. But being pregnant doesn't exempt you from considering other people's feelings." Amanda's eyes widened. This was not the accommodating sister she was used to. "Wow," she said. "Just wow. I come here with an olive branch, and this is how you treat me, by letting your friends ambush me." "An olive branch would include an acknowledgement of what happened, and an apology," I said, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "You haven't offered either." "This is ridiculous," Amanda snapped, gathering her purse. "I don't need to apologize for sharing my good news. If you want to be petty and jealous about it, that's your problem." "It's not about your news," I explained, maintaining my composure. "It's about how and when you chose to share it, and the fact that no one in our family thought my 30th birthday was worth even a phone call." "You know what, I'm not doing this right now," Amanda said, heading for the door. "I tried, Marianne. Remember that when Mom asks why there's tension?" After she left the room, remained silent for a moment. Then Rachel, my neighbor, who had never witnessed our family dynamic before, let out a low whistle. "Well, that was illuminating," she said. "You okay, Marianne?" To my surprise, I was. Better than okay. For the first time in my life, I had stood my ground with Amanda without apologizing for having needs or feelings. I had spoken my truth calmly and clearly. And most importantly, I had done so surrounded by people who validated rather than dismissed my perspective. "I'm actually great," I said, and meant it. The party continued, the brief tension giving way to deeper conversations and genuine laughter. By the end of the evening, as I hugged each guest goodbye, I felt a sense of belonging and acceptance I'd rarely experienced in my family of origin. Later that night, my phone buzzed with texts from my mother. Amanda had called her immediately after leaving my apartment, painting herself as the victim of an ambush. According to my mother, I had humiliated my sister, was acting out due to jealousy, and needed to apologize immediately. In the past, these messages would have sent me into a spiral of guilt and self-doubt. This time, I simply set my phone aside without responding. My mother's reaction was predictable, part of the same pattern I was finally breaking free from. Her attempts to make me responsible for Amanda's feelings no longer had the same power over me. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The confrontation with Amanda, while uncomfortable, had been illuminating. I had seen our dynamic played out in front of neutral observers who confirmed what I'd finally allowed myself to recognize: the pattern wasn't in my head. I wasn't being overly sensitive. And most importantly, I didn't have to participate in that dynamic any longer. The week following my rebirth celebration was surprisingly peaceful. I had expected to feel anxious after the confrontation with Amanda, but instead, I felt unburdened. I had spoken my truth without losing control, and the world hadn't ended. If anything, my relationships with my friends had deepened as they witnessed and supported me through a difficult moment. My mother continued sending texts demanding I apologize to Amanda, but I maintained my silence, not yet ready for another confrontation. My father called once, leaving a cautious voicemail asking me to make peace for the family's sake. Even Jack texted to say Mom's on the warpath. What happened with Amanda? I responded only to Jack, sending a brief but honest account of what had occurred at my party. He replied with a single yikes, followed by a supportive hang in there. 2 weeks after my rebirth celebration, I decided it was time to take the next step. The constant messages from my mother were becoming intrusive, and I knew avoiding the situation indefinitely wouldn't lead to resolution. After discussing it with Sarah, I decided to schedule a family meeting. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Sarah asked during our session. "I think so," I said. "Continuing to avoid them is just prolonging the inevitable. And if nothing changes after this conversation, at least I'll know I tried." "What's your best hope for the outcome?" I considered this carefully. Acknowledgement. I don't expect profound change overnight, but I want them to at least recognize the pattern and how it's affected me. Without that recognition, nothing can improve. And if they can't, or won't, provide that acknowledgement, then I'll need to adjust my expectations and boundaries accordingly, I said, the answer becoming clearer as I spoke. I can't control how they respond, only how I proceed afterward. Sarah nodded, looking impressed with my perspective. That's a very healthy approach, Marianne. You've come a long way in a short time. I sent a group text to my parents, Amanda and Jack, requesting a family meeting at my parents' house the following Saturday. I'd like to discuss some important matters calmly and productively, I wrote. It would mean a lot to have everyone present. To my surprise, everyone agreed to attend. My mother's response suggested she thought this was my way of making amends. Glad you're finally ready to put this nonsense behind us. I spent the days leading up to the meeting organizing my thoughts. I reviewed my evidence box not to weaponize the past, but to ground myself in concrete examples if gaslighting occurred. I practiced what I wanted to say, focusing on I statements that expressed my feelings without accusation. And I prepared myself for various reactions from denial to anger to dismissal. On Saturday, I arrived at my parents' house with nervous determination. My father answered the door with an awkward hug. Good to see you, kiddo, he said. It's been too long. Everyone was already gathered in the living room. My mother sat stiffly in her usual armchair, her expression a mixture of annoyance and expectation. Amanda and Blake occupied the love seat, her hand resting protectively on her slightly rounded belly. Jack perched on the edge of a dining chair he'd pulled in, looking uncomfortable. Marianne, my mother began immediately before you say anything. I want to be clear that this family has been through enough drama recently. If you're here to continue arguing about your birthday dinner, I think we all would prefer to move forward. I am here to move forward, Mom, I said calmly, taking a seat. But moving forward productively requires honest conversation first. Fine, she said with a sigh. Say what you need to say so we can get past this. I took a deep breath and began the speech I'd carefully prepared. For as long as I can remember, I've felt like an outsider in my own family. My accomplishments are minimized, my special occasions are overlooked, and my feelings are dismissed as oversensitivity. What happened on my birthday wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a lifelong pattern that has deeply hurt me. My mother immediately tried to interrupt, but I held up a hand. Please let me finish. I've listened to all of you my entire life. I'm asking for 10 minutes to express what I need to say. Surprised by my assertiveness, she fell silent. I continued, I've compiled a timeline of events throughout my life that illustrate this pattern. I opened a folder containing printed copies of my evidence, photos, text messages, emails, and a calendar of significant events with notes about what had occurred. My 16th birthday, when Mom scheduled Amanda's wisdom teeth removal the same day. My high school graduation, when you all left immediately after the ceremony to attend Amanda's dance recital. My college scholarship dinner that turned into Amanda's engagement celebration. My first apartment warming party that everyone canceled last minute because Amanda and Blake had a fight. I passed the timeline around. This isn't about one birthday dinner. It's about 30 years of being treated as less important, less worthy of celebration, less deserving of attention and care. The room was uncomfortably silent as they looked through the documentation. Amanda's face flushed with defensive anger. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. My father looked increasingly uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact. But it was Jack's expression that surprised me, a mixture of recognition and guilt. This is ridiculous, Amanda finally said, pushing the papers away. You've created this whole victim narrative by cherry-picking events from years ago. Every family has scheduling conflicts and misunderstandings. If these were isolated incidents, I would agree, I said. But they're not. They form a clear pattern that's been consistent throughout my life. So what do you want, my mother demanded? For us to never celebrate anything in Amanda's life? For her to dim her light so you can shine? That's not at all what I'm saying, I replied, maintaining my calm despite her attempt to provoke me. I'm asking for balance. For my life events to be given the same consideration and importance as Amanda's. For my feelings to be acknowledged rather than dismissed. I think you're being unfair, Amanda said, tears welling in her eyes in a display I'd seen countless times before. You're trying to make me feel guilty for sharing my pregnancy news. That's not something I should have to apologize for. The issue isn't that you shared your news, I explained patiently. It's that you chose to do it on the exact day of my birthday dinner, knowing everyone would be gathered, and no one, not one person in this family, thought to call me or include me or even acknowledge that it was my 30th birthday. We got caught up in the moment, my father offered weakly. It wasn't intentional. But Mom's comment on social media that morning proves she remembered my birthday dinner, I countered. And she admitted to me on the phone afterward that you all discussed whether to still come to my dinner and decided collectively that it wasn't important enough. My father looked startled at this revelation and turned to my mother with questioning eyes. That's not how it happened, my mother insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. We simply made a judgment call in the moment. A judgment call that my 30th birthday wasn't worth even a phone call, I said quietly. Just like all the other judgment calls over the years that consistently prioritized Amanda's needs and wants over mine. This is getting us nowhere, my mother said, standing up. You've clearly built up years of resentment, Marianne, and I don't think this conversation is productive. I had anticipated this reaction. The attempt to shut down the discussion when the evidence became too uncomfortable to dismiss. What I hadn't anticipated was Jack suddenly speaking up. No, Mom. Marianne deserves to be heard, he said, firmly surprising everyone in the room. And honestly, everything she's saying is true. The room went completely silent. Jack, who had always been the peacekeeper who rarely expressed strong opinions about family matters, was the last person anyone expected to take a stand. What are you talking about? Amanda asked, clearly blindsided. Jack turned to me with an apologetic expression. I've seen it happening our whole lives, but I never said anything. I was younger, and it was easier to go along with it than to challenge the dynamic. I'm really sorry, Marianne. He then addressed our parents. Mom, Dad, you know it's true. We've always centered family life around Amanda's needs and wants. Remember when Marianne got that writing award in high school, and we postponed her celebration dinner 3 times because of Amanda's minor emergencies? Or when Marianne wanted to apply for that study abroad program, and you discouraged? To her, because it would mean missing Amanda's wedding planning events. That's completely different, my mother protested, but her voice wavered slightly. It's not, Jack insisted. And here's something none of you know. 2 years ago, when I was thinking about moving to Chicago for that job offer, Mom told me I shouldn't take it because it would upset the family balance, and Amanda needs all of us nearby. She actually said, we can afford to have Marianne living in another city because she's more independent, but losing you two would be too much for the family system. I felt my breath catch at this revelation. My mother had explicitly acknowledged the different standards applied to Amanda and me, just not to my face. I was trying to keep the family together, my mother said defensively, her composure cracking. There's nothing wrong with wanting my children close by. But you specifically said it was okay for Marianne to be distant because the family doesn't need her as much. Jack pressed. Do you not see how hurtful that is? My mother's face flushed. For perhaps the first time in my memory, she seemed at a loss for words. My father cleared his throat. Jack, that's enough. I'm sure your mother didn't mean it that way. No, Jack said firmly. I'm tired of pretending. We've all contributed to this dynamic. You by always deferring to Mom's decisions even when they were unfair. Me by staying silent. And yes, Mom and Amanda, by actively maintaining a system that consistently sidelines Marianne. Amanda was crying now, but unlike her usual tears that immediately mobilized everyone to comfort her, these seemed more complex, partly defensive, partly genuine distress at having her role in the family system exposed. I never meant to hurt you, she said to me. I didn't think about it. I'm used to things revolving around what I want. At least that's honest, I said quietly. My mother stood up, visibly shaken. I think this conversation has gone far enough. We're all upset, and continuing will only make things worse. That's exactly the problem, I said, rising to meet her gaze. Whenever something uncomfortable arises, especially regarding how I'm treated in this family, it's immediately shut down as making things worse. My feelings aren't allowed to exist if they disrupt the family system. That's not true, my mother insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. It is true, Jack said, standing beside me now in a show of solidarity I had never expected, and continuing to deny it isn't helping anyone. My mother looked from Jack to me, then to my father, as if seeking support. But even he seemed uncertain now, the evidence, and Jack's testimony having cracked his habitual deference to her perspective. I need some air, my mother said abruptly and left the room. In her absence, a strange silence fell over us. The family dynamic so long maintained by her firm control seemed suddenly unstable. Amanda wiped her eyes, looking genuinely confused rather than manipulative for once. My father ran a hand through his hair, sighing deeply. I never saw it, clearly, he admitted after a moment. Or maybe I did, and it was easier not to address it. I'm sorry, Marianne. We should have done better by you. It wasn't a complete acknowledgement of the pattern, but it was more than I had expected from him. I nodded, accepting his limited apology for what it was. Amanda struggled visibly with what to say. "I don't think I did all this on purpose," she finally offered. "But maybe I did take advantage of how things worked in our family. I never stopped to think about how it affected you." Again, not a full acknowledgement, but a small step toward awareness. Jack caught my eye across the room, giving me a subtle nod of support and what looked like pride. When my mother returned 10 minutes later, her face was composed, but her eyes were red-rimmed. She sat down heavily in her armchair. "I've always tried to be a good mother," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "I've always wanted the best for all my children. If you felt overlooked, Marianne, that wasn't my intention." It was the closest thing to an apology she could manage in that moment. Acknowledging my feelings without accepting responsibility for causing them. I recognized it as the limited offering it was. "I know you love us, Mom," I said gently. "But love isn't enough if it doesn't come with respect and equal consideration. I'm not asking for special treatment, just the same care and attention given to everyone else in this family." She nodded stiffly, not quite agreeing, but not arguing either. "So where do we go from here?" my father asked, ever practical. "I need time," I said honestly. "And I need things to change. I can't just pretend this pattern doesn't exist and go back to accepting being an afterthought in my own family." "What kind of changes?" Amanda asked cautiously. "Awareness is the first step," I said, acknowledging the dynamic instead of denying it, making conscious efforts to balance attention and consideration, respecting my boundaries when I express them. Jack nodded. "That seems more than reasonable." My mother sat silently for a moment, then spoke with careful control. "I think we all need to reflect on this conversation. It's a lot to process. It wasn't the breakthrough I had hoped for, but it was a crack in the facade. The first acknowledgement, however, reluctant that there might be validity to my perspective. As family meetings went, it was both more painful and more productive than I had anticipated. As we prepared to leave, my mother approached me stiffly. "Will you be at Sunday dinner next week?" she asked, clinging to normalcy. "Not next week," I said gently. "I need some distance to process everything, but we'll talk soon." She nodded, disappointment visible but not pushing further, itself a small but significant change. Jack walked me to my car. "I should have spoken up years ago," he said, genuine regret in his voice. "I saw what was happening but took the path of least resistance." "We all played our parts in the family system," I said, hugging him. "Thank you for supporting me today. It meant everything." "This isn't going to change overnight," he warned. "Mom especially. She's built her entire identity around this family dynamic." "I know," I said. "But we've named it now. It can't remain invisible anymore." As I drove away from my childhood home, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, exhaustion from the confrontation relief at having finally spoken my truth, sadness at the pain I'd seen in my family members' faces, but most of all, profound sense of liberation. Whatever happened next, I had broken free from the constraints of silence and denial that had bound me for 30 years. The family system, I had always accepted as natural and unchangeable, had been revealed as the constructed, maintained pattern it was. And in that revelation lay the possibility, however distant, of something healthier for all of us. 6 months passed after the family meeting. The changes in our family dynamic weren't immediate or dramatic, but they were real. My mother initially retreated into hurt silence, sending occasional texts that oscillated between guilt-inducing, "I hope you're happy with the family division you've caused," and tentative outreach, "Just checking in to see how you're doing." I responded to the latter with brief but friendly updates, allowing the former to pass without engagement. My father made more consistent efforts, calling weekly, just to chat about my work or his golf game, carefully avoiding family drama unless I brought it up. These conversations were sometimes awkward, but gradually evolved into a more authentic connection than we'd ever had before. Amanda and I maintained a cordial distance. She sent ultrasound photos, which I acknowledged with appropriate enthusiasm while maintaining my boundaries. The performance of closeness had fallen away, leaving a more honest relationship in its wake. Not as warm, perhaps, but no longer built on denial and resentment. Jack and I grew closer than ever. Having broken his silence at the family meeting, he seemed freed to develop a more authentic relationship with me. He even moved into an apartment just 10 blocks from mine, a decision he made without consulting our mother first. A small act of independence that represented a significant shift in his own relationship with the family system. I continued therapy with Sarah, working through the complex emotions that arose as family patterns shifted and adjusted. I had good days and difficult ones, moments of doubt and moments of empowerment. The difference was that I no longer questioned the reality of my experience or diminished my own feelings to preserve family harmony. As my next birthday approached, my 31st, I made a deliberate decision. Rather than setting myself up for potential disappointment by creating expectations around family celebration, I would create a new tradition that honored my connection to the person who had always made me feel valued, my grandmother. I booked a weekend trip to Oceana, the small coastal town where my grandmother had grown up and where we had visited her sister, my great-aunt Marian, during summer vacations in my childhood. Great-aunt Marian had passed away years ago, but the town held precious memories of those rare occasions when I had my grandmother's undivided attention and unconditional love. I didn't announce this plan to my family, simply mentioning that I would be away for my birthday weekend when it came up in conversation. I packed my grandmother's letter and some old photos, booked a charming bed and breakfast overlooking the harbor, and drove the 3 hours to Oceana on a crisp autumn Friday. The weekend was everything I had hoped for. Peaceful mornings walking along the shore, afternoons, exploring shops and cafes. My grandmother had loved evenings reading by the fireplace in my cozy room. I visited the small local museum, where I found a community photo from 1963 that included my grandmother as a young woman. I ate dinner at the harbor restaurant, where she had always ordered lobster during our visits, insisting it was what vacation is for. On the morning of my actual birthday, I woke early to watch the sunrise over the water, bundled in a sweater against the October chill. As I sat on a weathered bench along the harbor walk, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had given myself the gift of honoring my own history, my own preferences, without requiring external validation or approval. My phone buzzed with birthday texts from friends throughout the day. Jessica sent a ridiculous singing video that made me laugh out loud on the quiet street. My colleagues had scheduled champagne delivery to the bed and breakfast, which arrived with a card signed by the entire marketing team. I was enjoying a birthday cupcake at a local bakery when my phone rang with my father's number. "Happy birthday, kiddo," he said, when I answered his voice, warmer than I remembered it being on past birthdays. "How's Oceana? Your mother mentioned you were taking a trip." "It's beautiful," I said, surprised he knew where I was. "How did you know I was here specifically?" "Jack mentioned it. Said it was Grandma Helen's hometown." "That sounds like a nice way to spend your birthday." "It is," I agreed. "Peaceful. I needed that." He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. "I've been doing some thinking since our family meeting. Some reading, too. And some therapy, actually, though. Don't tell your mother I told you that." This revelation stunned me. My father, who had always dismissed therapy as paying someone to listen to your problems, had sought professional help. "I've been looking back at a lot of things," he continued. "Times when I should have stepped up for you but didn't. Times when I let your mother handle everything because it was easier than rocking the boat. I'm sorry, Marianne. I should have been a better advocate for you." The simple, straightforward apology, one that took responsibility rather than minimizing or excusing, brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you, Dad," I managed to say. "That means a lot." "I know it's too little too late, in many ways," he acknowledged. "But I want you to know I'm working on it. On being better, more aware." We talked for another 20 minutes, the conversation flowing more naturally than it had in years. He told me about his therapy sessions, his growing recognition of patterns in his own childhood that had shaped his passive approach to family conflict. I shared my experiences in Oceania, the connections I was finding to my grandmother's life. "She always saw you clearly," my father said. "Better than the rest of us did." After we hung up, I sat in the bakery for a long time processing the unexpected gift of my father's growth and acknowledgement. It wasn't a Hollywood movie transformation, but it was real and meaningful. That evening, I returned to my room to find a package had been delivered, a small, carefully wrapped box with Jack's handwriting on the card. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a charm in the shape of a lighthouse, one of my grandmother's favorite symbols. "To guide you home," Jack had written, "wherever home may be for you now. Happy birthday from someone who sees you clearly. Love, Jack." I fastened it around my wrist, touched by his thoughtfulness and the explicit acknowledgement of my journey toward defining my own sense of belonging. The day after I returned from Oceania, an email arrived from an unexpected source, my mother. The subject line simply read, "For your birthday," though it was now 3 days past. The message contained no text, just an attachment. When I opened it, I found a scanned image of a page from what appeared to be my mother's journal, dated 2 weeks earlier. "I am trying to understand," she had written. "My therapist, yes, I finally took Thomas's advice, says I need to examine why I resist acknowledging Marianne's feelings about family dynamics. The truth, which I've never admitted even to myself, is that I see too much of myself in her. My own mother favored my sister in the same ways Marianne claims I favor Amanda. The difference is that I never confronted it. I built my life around seeking the approval I never received, then unconsciously recreated the same pattern with my daughters. I'm not ready to discuss this with Marianne directly. The shame is too great. But perhaps sharing this journal entry is a start toward honesty. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was something perhaps more valuable, a glimpse of self-awareness and vulnerability from a woman who had always presented herself as infallible. The acknowledgement that she too had been shaped by family patterns offered a new perspective on her behavior, not excusing it, but providing context that allowed for greater compassion on my part. I didn't respond immediately, needing time to process this unexpected revelation. A week later, I sent a simple text. "Thank you for sharing that with me. It helps me understand. I'm here when you're ready to talk more." She replied with just a heart emoji, uncharacteristically simple for a woman who typically expressed herself in paragraphs of justification. In that small digital heart, I sensed both her limitation and her effort. 2 months after my birthday, as the winter holidays approached, Jack suggested hosting a small family dinner at his new apartment. "Neutral territory," he said. "Low pressure. Just the 5 of us." I agreed cautiously, setting clear internal boundaries about my expectations. The evening wasn't perfect. My mother was still somewhat stiff. Amanda still occasionally slipped into making everything about her pregnancy now in its 7th month, but there were moments of genuine connection too. My father engaged me in conversation about my work projects with unprecedented interest. Jack facilitated smoothly when tensions arose. And most surprisingly, my mother had made my grandmother's apple spice cake, a small gesture of recognition that brought tears to my eyes when she presented it. "Your grandmother would be proud of you," she said quietly, as she served it, the closest she had come to directly addressing the changes in our relationship. "She always said you had a strength the rest of us couldn't see." As winter turned to spring, these small shifts continued to accumulate. Family dynamics built over decades didn't transform overnight, but the rigid patterns had loosened, creating space for more authentic interactions. Some days were better than others. Old habits occasionally resurfaced. But we were no longer pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't, no longer maintaining a facade of family harmony at the expense of truth. Amanda gave birth to a healthy baby boy in January. I visited the hospital bringing a thoughtfully chosen gift and genuine good wishes, staying for an appropriate time before giving other visitors their turn. The performance of being the ecstatically close sisters we had never actually been had fallen away, replaced by a more honest relationship that acknowledged both our connection and our differences. When April arrived and the planning for my 32nd birthday began, I decided to host a small gathering at my apartment, not a recreation of the previous year's dinner, but something new. I invited Jack and his new girlfriend. My mother had a prior commitment. She actually called to apologize for Jessica and her husband and a few close friends. As we sat around my living room enjoying dessert, Jack raised his glass. To Marianne, he said, who taught all of us that speaking your truth, however uncomfortable, is the only path to genuine connection. This past year hasn't been easy, but it's been real in a way our family never was before. My father nodded, adding his own toast. To growth and second chances. And to Helen, who would be so proud of the woman her granddaughter has become. Later that evening, after everyone had gone, and I was cleaning up alone, I found myself studying the photo I had placed on my mantel 6 months earlier. It showed my rebirth celebration from the previous year, the gathering of friends who had become family, gathered around me as I blew out candles on a cake Jessica had brought. Beside it, now stood a new photo from this evening's gathering. Smaller, but including both chosen and biological family all genuinely present. I took a photo of these two images side by side and sent it to Sarah with the caption, "This is what healing looks like." Her response came quickly. Not perfect, not finished, but real and in progress. You should be incredibly proud of the boundaries you've set and the authenticity you've insisted on. Happy birthday, Marianne. I sat in my quiet apartment, reflecting on the journey of the past year. The painful birthday that had catalyzed so much change now seemed like a gift in disguise, the breaking point that had finally allowed me to recognize patterns I had normalized for too long and begin creating a life defined by authentic connections rather than obligatory roles. Family remained complicated. Some wounds would never fully heal. My mother might never be able to give me the validation and recognition I had craved as a child. Amanda might always struggle with sharing the spotlight. But I had learned that I didn't need to make myself smaller to accommodate these limitations. I could set boundaries, speak my truth, and create a life rich with genuine connection on my own terms. My grandmother's words from her long-ago letter echoed in my mind. My greatest wish for you is that you will recognize your own worth independent of anyone else's validation. In the years since my 30th birthday, I had finally embraced that wisdom, learning that the most important validation comes not from others, but from honoring my own experience and needs. The journey wasn't over, but I was no longer lost. I had found my way to a self-defined sense of home and belonging, guided by the lighthouse of my own truth. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who consistently overlooked your needs or achievements? How did you find the courage to speak your truth, and what happened afterward? I'd love to hear your stories in the Steed comments. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they deserve to be celebrated too. Thank you for joining me on this journey of growth and self-discovery. Remember, recognizing your own worth is the first step toward building the authentic connections we all deserve.